Sign this fake confession. The CEO said, but the pen he gave the cleaning lady ruined him. Before we begin, have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do at work? Let us know your story in the comments. And at the end, don't forget to rate this from 0 to 10. Enjoy. The 50th floor of Sterling Enterprises was Julian Sterling's kingdom, a realm of polished glass, silent tension, and absolute control. At 42, Julian had a reputation carved from granite and ice. He didn't run his multi-billion-dollar real estate empire. He commanded it. His philosophy was brutally simple. Mistakes were weaknesses to be excised, and the cleaning staff were meant to be invisible. This was a lesson the night crew knew by heart. Their unwritten rule was sacred. If you saw Mr. Sterling working late, you did not enter his office. You did not make a sound. You became a ghost, finishing your duties and vanishing before he even registered your presence. All of them followed this rule. All of them, except the new girl. Her name was Maya. She was 28, with warm, intelligent eyes that missed nothing, and a quiet energy that was more like a steady flame than a flickering candle. In her 1 week at Sterling Enterprises, she had already concluded that the company's biggest liability wasn't in its stock portfolio. It was the suffocating fear radiating from the CEO's office. The confrontation, when it came, was not something anyone could have predicted. It was a Wednesday night, and Julian was in a foul mood. A massive deal in Dubai had hit a snag, and he had been on a series of brutal conference calls for hours. He was standing in his vast, glass-walled office, staring out at the glittering city lights, when Maya quietly pushed her cleaning cart to his doorway. She knocked softly on the doorframe. Julian didn't turn. "What?" he snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Excuse me, Mr. Sterling," Maya said, her voice calm and clear. "I just need to empty the trash." He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. "I'm working. Come back later." "With all due respect, sir," she replied, not backing down, "my shift ends in 15 minutes. If I come back later, it will be on my own time. I'm sure a man who values efficiency as much as you do can appreciate that." The sheer, unadulterated audacity of her response left him momentarily speechless. No one, not even his most senior vice president, spoke to him with such direct, logical defiance. He was about to tell her to get out and not come back, but something in her steady, unapologetic gaze stopped him. "Fine," he bit out. "Be quick and be quiet." Maya nodded and efficiently went about her work. She emptied the wastebasket, wiped down a side table, and was about to leave when her eyes fell upon a document left carelessly on the corner of his desk. It was a preliminary site analysis for a new project, and a single, glaring error in the zoning code reference caught her eye. It was a simple typo, a B where a D should have been, but it was the kind of small mistake that could cost millions in permits and delays down the line. Her father, a meticulous city planner who had lost his job due to a similar clerical error made by a superior, had drilled one lesson into her: details matter. She hesitated for only a second. "Sir," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Julian, who had turned his back to her, was on the phone with his lead architect. "No, David, that's not a solution," he was saying, his frustration evident. "Moving the support column will compromise the entire atrium design. We need to find a way to maintain the aesthetic without sacrificing structural integrity. It's impossible." "It's not impossible," Maya said, a little louder this time. Julian froze. He slowly turned around. Maya was standing there, looking at the document on his desk with a focused intensity. "Excuse me?" he said, his voice dangerously low as he ended his call. She seemed to realize she had spoken her thoughts aloud, and a faint blush rose on her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I shouldn't have. I saw the zoning code on that document. It's incorrect. Section 17B doesn't apply to commercial high-rises. It should be 17D. It changes the setback requirements entirely." The silence in the office was deafening. Julian stared at her, then at the document, then back at her. His lead architect, David, was still on the speakerphone, and his shocked voice came through. She's right. My God, how did we miss that?" Julian felt a wave of hot, sharp humiliation. A cleaning lady had just publicly corrected a multi-million-dollar mistake in front of his lead architect. The fact that she was right only made it worse. His frustration, his exhaustion, and his wounded pride erupted into a cold, cruel fury. "Well, well," he said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "It seems we have a hidden genius in our midst, a janitor with a passion for municipal codes. How utterly charming." He walked over to his desk and picked up a different document, a non-disclosure agreement he had been preparing for a disgruntled former employee he was paying off. An idea, a truly malicious one, formed in his mind. He would put this woman back in her place, once and for all. He scribbled a few lines on a blank piece of paper, attached it to the NDA, and strode over to her. "Since you're so interested in our documents, Miss Maya," she supplied, her chin held high. "Maya," he repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Perhaps you'd be willing to help with another piece of paperwork. A formality." He held out the papers to her. At the top, in his sharp, angry handwriting, were the words, "Confession of Corporate Espionage." Maya's eyes widened as she read the line below. "I, Maya, admit to accessing confidential documents with the intent to sell them to competitors." "This is insane," she whispered, taking a step back. "I didn't do any of this." "Of course you didn't," Julian said with his cruel smile. "But in the corporate world, perception is reality, and a fired cleaning lady found with sensitive information, it's a very believable story." He was bluffing, creating a narrative to intimidate her, to break her. "I have a board meeting tomorrow. I can't have them thinking my team is incompetent. I need a scapegoat." "You want me to take the fall for your team's mistake?" she asked, her voice a mixture of disbelief and outrage. "I want you to be a team player," he countered smoothly. "Sign this, and I'll give you a generous severance package, enough to solve any financial problems you might have. Refuse." He paused, letting the threat hang in the air, "and I'll make sure the official story is the one that benefits me. And trust me, my story is always more convincing." He was backing her into a corner, using his power to crush her. He expected her to cry, to beg. He wanted to see her break. But Maya looked at the fake confession, then at his arrogant, confident face, and the fear in her eyes was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "And what if I sign it?" she asked, her voice steady, "and then I tell everyone you forced me to?" Julian let out a genuine laugh. "Who would believe you? It would be your word, the word of a disgraced janitor against mine." He leaned in, his voice a low, mocking whisper. "I own the truth in this building, Maya. You just clean the floors it's built on." He pulled a pen from his jacket pocket, an expensive, heavy, gold-nibbed fountain pen. "So, what will it be?" He watched her, a triumphant smirk on his face. This was it, the moment she would crumble. She looked at him for a long, silent moment. She saw the cruelty in his eyes, the absolute certainty of his power, and she made a choice. "All right," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "I'll sign it." Julian's smirk widened. Victory. He had won. He handed her the pen and the document. "A wise decision." "Is it?" she asked, taking the pen. She looked at it, then back at him, a strange, enigmatic glint in her eyes. "You know, my grandfather was an inventor. He used to say that sometimes the smallest tools hold the biggest secrets." Julian frowned, not understanding her cryptic remark. "Just sign the paper, Maya." "Of course," she said. She uncapped the pen, poised the nib over the signature line, and looked up at him one last time. "But just for the record, Mr. Sterling, this is your pen. Remember that." She signed her name with a simple, elegant flourish. As she wrote, she discreetly pressed a tiny, almost invisible button on the side of the pen. A faint, nearly inaudible click echoed in the silent office. Julian didn't notice. He was too busy savoring his win. She handed the signed confession and the pen back to him. "There," she said, her expression now completely unreadable. "Is that all?" "That's all," he said, taking the document. "Your services are no longer required. Security will escort you out." As Maya turned and walked out of his office, head held high, Julian looked down at the signed confession in his hand. He felt a surge of satisfaction. He had reasserted his control, eliminated a minor annoyance, and found a neat solution to his problem. He was Julian Sterling. He always won. He had absolutely no idea that the pen he now held in his hand contained a high-fidelity audio recording of the entire conversation. Every threat, every admission of coercion, every cruel word. He had handed her the weapon, and she had just loaded it. He thought he had ruined her. He had just ruined himself. The silence in the aftermath of Maya's departure felt different. It wasn't the usual power-infused quiet of Julian's office. It was an empty, unsettling silence. He looked at the signed confession on his desk, but the thrill of victory was already fading, replaced by a strange, hollow feeling. He told himself it was the right move, a necessary act of control. But the image of Maya's calm, defiant eyes as she walked out lingered in his mind. He picked up the fountain pen she had used. It felt heavy in his hand, a symbol of his authority. "This is your pen, remember that." Her words echoed in his head. A strange, nonsensical statement. He dismissed it as the last-ditch effort of a defeated woman and placed the pen back in his jacket pocket, ready to move on. The next morning, the board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. Julian walked into the boardroom feeling his usual confidence return. The issue with the Orion Tower blueprint had been solved, thanks to the cleaning lady, a fact he would conveniently omit. Now, all he had to do was present the project with his usual commanding flair. His father, Arthur Sterling Sr., the company's formidable chairman, sat at the head of the table. He was a man from an older, even more ruthless generation of business, and his approval was the one thing Julian had spent his entire life trying to earn. "Julian," Arthur Sr. said, his voice a low grumble, "I heard there was a hiccup with the Orion plans, and that you terminated a member of the night crew. An unusual move. Explain." "A minor security breach, father," Julian lied smoothly. "A disgruntled employee was caught with sensitive materials. I handled it. The situation is under control." "Good," his father replied, though his sharp eyes seemed to see more than Julian was letting on. "Let's begin." Julian started his presentation. He was halfway through explaining the brilliance of the atrium design, his father's design, now corrected by Maya's father's genius, when his assistant, a nervous young woman named Chloe, entered the room and discreetly handed him a note. "Sir, there's a problem. All the major news outlets are calling, and there's a video." Julian's blood ran cold. He quickly finished his point, and, under the pretense of needing a document from his office, stepped out of the boardroom. "What video?" he hissed at Chloe. She handed him a tablet, her hands trembling. "It was uploaded an hour ago. It already has 500,000 views." He pressed play. The video was shot from a strange angle, low and slightly distorted, as if from a device placed on a desk. The audio, however, was crystal clear. It was his office. It was his voice. "Sign this, and I'll give you a generous severance package. Refuse, and I'll make sure the official story is the one that benefits me. I own the truth in this building, Maya. You just clean the floors it's built on." He watched the entire damning conversation unfold. The threat, the coercion, the confession. He felt the world tilt on its axis. The pen, the tiny, almost invisible button. Her grandfather was an inventor. The smallest tools hold the biggest secrets. It wasn't a pen. It was a recorder. "Who sent this?" he demanded, his voice a choked whisper. "The email came from an anonymous source," Chloe said, her face pale. But the subject line was, "The Sterling Truth." He stumbled back against the wall, the tablet slipping from his fingers. She had done it. The invisible cleaning lady had just detonated a bomb in the middle of his empire. The lie he had tried to force on her was now an undeniable, globally accessible truth. He walked back into the boardroom, his face ashen. Every member of the board was now looking at their phones, their expressions a mixture of shock and disgust. His father was staring at him, his face a mask of cold, silent fury. "Julian," Arthur Sr. said, his voice dangerously quiet, "what is the meaning of this?" Before Julian could even attempt to form a sentence, the doors to the boardroom swung open. 2 uniformed security guards entered, followed by a woman in a sharp, professional suit, and behind them, calm and composed, was Maya. She was no longer wearing the gray uniform of a cleaner. She was dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, her hair pulled back, her intelligent eyes holding a fire that Julian had never seen before. She was no longer a ghost. She was a reckoning. "My name is Maya Jenkins," she said, her voice clear and strong, addressing the entire board. "And for the past week, I've been the target of a campaign of intimidation and coercion by your CEO, Julian Sterling." She gestured to the woman beside her. "This is my lawyer." The room was in an uproar. "This is an outrage," one board member shouted. "A private company matter being aired in public." It became a public matter the moment Mr. Sterling threatened an innocent woman and attempted to make her a scapegoat for his own team's incompetence. Maya's lawyer replied coolly. But this video, Julian finally found his voice, gesturing wildly. It was recorded illegally. It's inadmissible. Is it? Maya asked, a small, knowing smile on her face. Actually, under state law, a conversation can be legally recorded with the consent of one party. And I consented. She then looked directly at him. But that's not the most interesting part, is it, Mr. Sterling? She stepped forward, holding a small, elegant fountain pen. The most interesting part is the pen you used to try and force my signature. This pen. She held it up for the board to see. It's a beautiful piece, a Mont Blanc, I believe. A gift, perhaps? She asked, her eyes never leaving his. My lawyer did a little digging. This pen was a gift to you from your father, wasn't it? On the day you took over the company. Arthur Sterling Sr. flinched, a flicker of pained recognition in his eyes. And here's the secret, Maya continued, her voice dropping, drawing every person in the room into her narrative. This pen wasn't just a gift. It's a custom piece. My grandfather, a man who specialized in miniature electronics, designed it for your father years ago. It has a high-fidelity audio recorder built into the casing, a little insurance policy for a man who, like you, didn't always trust the people he did business with. The room was completely silent. Julian stared at the pen, then at his father, a dawning horror on his face. Your father gave you the very tool of his own paranoia, Maya said, her voice soft but cutting. And you, in your arrogance, you used it to try and destroy me. You handed your secret to the one person in the world who would know exactly what it was. She placed the pen on the table. I didn't expose you, Julian. You exposed yourself. You, your father, your shared legacy of mistrust. It was all right there, in your pocket. She had not just ruined him with a secret recording. She had dismantled his entire identity, exposing the rotten foundation of lies and fear upon which the Sterling Empire was built. It wasn't just a corporate scandal. It was a Greek tragedy, and she had just delivered the final, devastating monologue. The silence in the boardroom was a physical entity, heavy and suffocating. Julian Sterling, a man who had built an empire on his ability to control every narrative, stood utterly exposed. The pen, his father's pen, now sat on the polished table between him and the board, a gleaming symbol of his own self-destruction. His father, Arthur Sterling Sr., stared at the pen, then at his son, his face a mask of cold, profound disappointment. Is this true, Julian? Arthur Sr.'s voice was a low rumble that cut through the tension. Did you threaten this young woman? Julian opened his mouth, but no words came out. The evidence was absolute, his own voice condemning him from a video that was, at that very moment, likely being mirrored on every news site on the planet. Maya's lawyer stepped forward, calm and prepared. We have the full, unedited audio file, Mr. Sterling, she said, addressing the chairman, as well as a sworn affidavit from my client detailing the events. Mr. Julian Sterling used his position of power to coerce a false confession from Miss Jenkins to cover up a significant error made by his own architectural team. And the blueprint? A board member asked, looking at Maya with a new respect. The design for the Orion Tower, you really recreated it from memory? I did, Maya confirmed, her voice steady. But as I stated, the design was not created by Arthur Sterling Sr. It was created by my father, Thomas Jenkins. His work was stolen years ago. A new wave of shock rippled through the room. This was no longer just about a coerced confession. It was about intellectual property theft, a scandal that could undermine the very foundation of the Sterling brand. This is a baseless accusation. One of Julian's loyal VPs protested. Is it? Maya's lawyer countered, pulling a folder from her briefcase. We have copies of Thomas Jenkins' original design sketches, dated 3 years before Sterling Enterprises ever announced the Orion project. The similarities are not just striking. They are identical, down to the last micro-support. Arthur Sterling Sr. looked like he had aged 10 years and 10 minutes. He looked at Julian, his eyes filled with a fury that was almost frightening. You not only threatened an employee, you built our company's flagship project on a stolen legacy? Father, Julian began, but his father cut him off with a sharp wave of his hand. Silence. I will deal with you later. He then turned his steely gaze to Maya. Miss Jenkins, what is it that you want? It was the question the entire room was waiting for. A lawsuit? A multi-million-dollar settlement? Public revenge? Maya took a deep breath. She had thought about this moment for years, dreamed of it. But now that it was here, the taste of victory was not as sweet as she had imagined. Seeing Julian, so broken and defeated, didn't bring her joy. It just felt sad. "I want justice for my father," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I want his name credited as the true architect of the Orion Tower, and I want a public apology from Sterling Enterprises." "And for yourself?" Arthur Sr. pressed. "For myself," Maya said, her eyes briefly meeting Julian's, "I want nothing. I just want to go back to my life." Julian flinched as if she had slapped him. Go back to her life? A life of cleaning floors and being invisible? After everything that had happened, the thought was suddenly unbearable to him. Arthur Sr. studied her for a long, silent moment. "Very well," he said at last. He turned to the board. "Sterling Enterprises will issue an immediate public statement. Thomas Jenkins will be posthumously credited as the lead architect of the Orion Tower. A significant donation will be made in his name to the National Architectural Foundation." He then looked back at Maya. "And you will receive a formal public apology from this company, and from my son." He stood up, his authority absolute. "This meeting is adjourned. Julian, you will stay." As the board members filed out of the room, whispering amongst themselves, Maya and her lawyer also prepared to leave. "Maya, wait," Julian called out, his voice desperate. She paused at the door, her back to him. "Thank you," he said, the words costing him a visible effort. "For what?" she asked without turning. "For not asking for money? For not suing us into bankruptcy?" "No," he said, his voice rough. "For telling the truth." She finally turned to look at him. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, humbling shame. For a fleeting moment, she didn't see the ruthless CEO. She saw a lost man, a son who had just been publicly condemned by his own father. "The truth is all my father ever had," she said softly. "It's the only thing he left me." And with that, she walked out, leaving Julian alone to face the wrath of his. The fallout was swift and brutal. The sterling truth video became a viral sensation. News outlets feasted on the story: the billionaire CEO, the brilliant cleaning lady, the stolen blueprint, the secret recorder pen. Sterling Enterprises' stock plummeted. Julian was suspended as CEO indefinitely by his father, and the board initiated an internal investigation. Julian was a pariah in his own kingdom. He spent his days in the empty penthouse, the silence a constant reminder of his failure. He replayed the events over and over in his mind. But it wasn't the loss of power or the public humiliation that haunted him. It was the memory of Maya's face, the quiet dignity with which she had faced him, the sad resolve in her eyes when she said she wanted to go back to her life. He had offered her $1 million to prove he was lying, and she had done it. But her victory hadn't been about the money, it had been about honor. And that was a currency Julian was only just beginning to understand. Meanwhile, Maya's life had been turned upside down. She was no longer invisible. She was the janitor genius, a reluctant media sensation. Reporters camped outside her small apartment building. Job offers poured in from architectural firms across the country. She was hailed as a hero, a symbol of the underdog speaking truth to power. But Maya didn't feel like a hero. She felt exhausted. The public attention was overwhelming, and the victory felt hollow. Justice had been served for her father, but her own life was in chaos. And despite everything, she couldn't stop thinking about Julian. She thought of the flicker of panic in his eyes when she had first revealed his lie, the raw pain when he spoke of his own father. She had set out to ruin him, and she had succeeded. So why did it feel less like a victory and more like a tragedy? A week after the board meeting, there was a soft knock on her apartment door. She opened it to find Arthur Sterling Sr. standing there. He looked older, more tired than he had in the boardroom. "Miss Jenkins," he said, his voice formal. "May I have a word?" She let him in, her heart pounding. Was he here to threaten her? To offer a settlement to make her disappear for good? "I'm not here to talk about lawsuits," he said, as if reading her mind. He sat on her small, worn sofa, looking strangely out of place. "I'm here to talk about my son." He let out a heavy sigh. "Julian has locked himself away. He refuses to see anyone, to speak to anyone. He's a proud man, and this humiliation has broken him in a way I've never seen." "I never meant for this to be personal," Maya said quietly. "But it was, wasn't it?" Arthur replied, his sharp eyes seeing right through her. "For both of you." He leaned forward. He told me about your father, about what happened. I want you to know, I had no idea about the extent of Julian's methods in that acquisition. It was ruthless, and it was wrong. It was the closest to an apology a man like Arthur Sterling would ever give. Julian has made many mistakes, his father continued. He built his life on a foundation of fear. The fear of ending up like his own father, a failure. He thought control was the same as strength. He was wrong. He looked at Maya, his gaze intense. You showed him that. You are the first person in his life who has ever managed to break through his armor. What do you want from me, Mr. Sterling? I want you to talk to him, he said, the words a plea. He won't listen to me. He won't listen to anyone. But you are the only one who has ever told him a truth he was forced to hear. Maybe you're the only one who can help him find his way out of this. I'm the one who put him there, she said, the guilt she had been suppressing finally surfacing. No, Arthur said, standing up. His own actions put him there. You just held up the mirror. He walked to the door and paused. He needs help, Miss Jenkins. And for reasons I don't fully understand, I believe you are the only person in the world who can give it to him. The weight of Arthur Sterling's request settled heavily on Maya's shoulders. Talk to Julian? The man she had publicly dismantled? It felt like an impossible task. Her initial mission was complete. She had achieved justice for her father. Her logical mind told her to walk away, to accept one of the dozens of job offers on her table and start a new life, far from the Sterling family and their complicated legacy of pain. But her heart told a different story. The image of Julian, broken and isolated, haunted her. She hadn't wanted to destroy him as a man, only to hold him accountable for his actions as a CEO. His father's words echoed in her mind. You are the only person who can help him find his way out. Was it possible that her journey with Julian wasn't over, that it had just entered a new, far more complicated chapter? After a long, sleepless night, she made a decision that defied all logic. She would see him. One last time. She called Arthur Sterling the next morning. I'll talk to him, she said, her voice a quiet resolve. But on my terms, at a neutral location. Not his penthouse, not my apartment. Thank you, Miss Jenkins, the old man said, a palpable relief in his voice. I am in your debt. The location Maya chose was the Chicago Cultural Center, a beautiful, quiet building filled with art and history, a place of reflection, not of power. She waited for him in Preston Bradley Hall, beneath the world's largest Tiffany glass dome. The intricate, colorful glass cast a soft mosaic light onto the marble floors, creating a serene, almost sacred atmosphere. When Julian arrived, she barely recognized him. The impeccably tailored suit was gone, replaced by simple dark jeans and a plain gray sweater. The arrogant, commanding posture had vanished, leaving a man who seemed smaller, more uncertain. He looked tired, his eyes holding a deep, hollowed-out pain. He stopped a few feet away from her, his hands shoved into his pockets, looking less like a billionaire CEO and more like a lost soul. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice rough, unused. Your father asked me to, she replied, her own voice carefully neutral. He's worried about you. Julian let out a short, humorless laugh. My father's worry is a recent and unwelcome development. He usually prefers disappointment. They stood in silence for a long moment, the beauty of the room a stark contrast to the ugliness that lay between them. I saw the news, Maya said, breaking the silence. About my father. You gave him full credit for the Orion Tower. You made the donation in his name. It was the least I could do, Julian murmured, his gaze fixed on the intricate patterns of the dome above. It was everything, she corrected softly. It was the justice he deserved. Thank you, Julian. Hearing her say his name, without the cold, the professional veneer, seemed to shake him. He finally looked at her, his eyes raw with a vulnerability she had never seen. I'm sorry, Maya, he whispered, the words sounding foreign on his lips. For everything, for what I did to your father, for what I did to you, for the kind of man I was. I know, she said, and to her own surprise she meant it. The anger that had fueled her for so long had been replaced by a profound, aching sadness for the waste of it all, for her father's lost years, for Julian's lost humanity. My father, Julian began, his voice cracking slightly. He called me last night. He told me he was proud of me. For the first time in my entire life, proud of me for failing, for losing, for giving away half of what he spent his life building. He shook his head in disbelief. It seems my greatest failure is the only thing I've ever done that he truly respects." "Maybe it wasn't a failure, Julian," Maya said gently. "Maybe it was a victory." They started to walk, their footsteps echoing softly on the marble floors. They moved through the quiet galleries, two solitary figures surrounded by art, their conversation a hesitant, fragile bridge being built over a chasm of pain. "What will you do now?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted, and the honesty of it was startling. "My father has taken over as interim CEO. The board wants me gone permanently. My reputation is in ruins. I have nothing." "You have a chance to start over," she said, echoing the words he had once said to her in a very different context. "To build something new." He stopped in front of a large, abstract painting, a chaotic swirl of dark colors with a single bright slash of gold. "And what about you?" he asked, turning to her. "You have job offers from every top firm in the country. You're a hero. You can go anywhere, do anything. What will you do?" "I don't know either," she confessed. "The victory feels complicated. I spent so long focused on getting justice for my father that I never thought about what would come after." They stood there, two people at a crossroads, their old lives in ashes, their futures a terrifying, unwritten blank page. "I rewatched the video," Julian said suddenly, his gaze not meeting hers. "The one from my office." Maya felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "I listened to myself," he continued, his voice full of self-loathing. "I own the truth in this building. My God, the arrogance, the cruelty." He finally looked at her. "But what I keep hearing is what you said, about my father's pen, about how I handed you my secret." He took a step closer. "You knew about the recorder from the beginning, didn't you? From the moment I handed it to you." She nodded. "My grandfather was a craftsman. He specialized in hiding things in plain sight. I recognized his work." "So you didn't just expose me with a lucky break," he said, a look of dawning understanding on his face. "You set a trap. You knew I was arrogant enough to try and coerce you, and you waited for me to hand you the weapon." "I waited for you to show your true character," she corrected. "I had hoped I would be wrong about you." He let out a long, slow breath. "But you weren't. I was exactly the man you thought I was." He looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "Am I still that man, Maya?" The question hung in the air, heavy and profound. She looked at the man in front of her, the man who had given up his power, faced his past, and was now standing before her, stripped of all his defenses. He was not the same man. He was broken, yes, but in that brokenness there was a new, fragile honesty. "No," she said softly, "I don't think you are." A flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. "Maya," he began, taking another step closer, "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I am. Don't go. Don't disappear from my life." "Julian, I don't mean as an employee or a consultant," he said quickly, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I mean as a friend, as someone I need. I'm lost, Maya, and you are the only person who has ever shown me the way to be a better man. Please," his voice dropped to a desperate whisper, "don't leave me to find my way alone." She looked at him, her heart torn. Every rational part of her brain told her to run, to protect herself from this man whose life was a vortex of drama and pain. But the part of her that had seen his vulnerability, that had heard the genuine remorse in his voice, that had felt a strange, undeniable connection to him even in their moments of greatest conflict, that part of her couldn't walk away. "I'm not going anywhere, Julian," she said, the words a quiet promise. "Not yet." The week following their meeting at the cultural center was a masterclass in awkward politeness. They were allies, not enemies, but they were also not quite friends. They existed in a strange limbo. Two celestial bodies caught in a new, uncertain orbit around each other. Julian, true to his word, gave her space. But his presence was a constant, quiet hum in the background of her life. A gourmet coffee delivery would arrive at her apartment with a simple note, "Thought you might need this." When her laptop crashed, a brand new, top-of-the-line model was delivered within the hour with another note, "A craftsman is only as good as her tools." Maya accepted the gestures with a cautious gratitude. She knew he was trying, clumsily, to show he cared. But she kept a professional distance, communicating through polite, brief text messages. She was still processing the seismic shift in their dynamic, still terrified of what it might mean to truly trust him. The stalemate broke on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Maya was in her small apartment, sketching designs in an old notebook, ideas for buildings, parks, community centers. It was a habit she had never lost, a way of keeping her father's dream and her own alive. There was a knock on the door. When she opened it, Julian was standing there, holding two large umbrellas, looking completely out of place on her worn-out welcome mat. "We need to talk," he said, his tone not commanding, but simply direct. "About what?" she asked, clutching her notebook to her chest. "About the future," he replied, "specifically yours." She let him in, and he stood in the middle of her small living room, taking in the space. It was humble, filled with secondhand furniture and stacks of books, but it was warm, personal. It was a home. His penthouse was just a collection of expensive, empty rooms. "You can't spend the rest of your life as a media spectacle," he began, getting straight to the point. "You're a brilliant architect, Maya. The world needs to see what you can do." "And how am I supposed to do that, Julian?" she asked, a familiar bitterness in her voice. "My last name is now synonymous with your company's biggest scandal. No reputable firm will touch me." "Then don't work for a reputable firm," he said, a spark of his old strategic brilliance returning, but this time it was aimed at helping, not conquering. "Build your own." She stared at him as if he'd suggested they build a rocket to the moon. "With what? Good intentions and a sketchbook?" "With this," he said, placing a thick folder on her small coffee table. She opened it. Inside was a complete business plan, a proposal for a new independent architectural firm. It detailed startup costs, market analysis, potential client lists, and a 5-year growth projection. At the top of the first page, in elegant bold letters, was the proposed name, the Jenkins Group, in honor of Thomas Jenkins. Maya sank onto the sofa, speechless. "I spent the last week talking to my financial team," Julian explained, his voice a low, steady hum. "I've established a blind trust. It will provide the initial seed capital for the firm. It's not a gift from me, Maya. It's an investment made by an anonymous backer who believes in your father's legacy and in your talent." "Anonymous?" she whispered, knowing full well who the backer was. "Completely," he said, meeting her gaze. "No strings attached. The firm would be yours. Your name, your vision, your rules." She looked at the meticulously detailed plan, at the sheer scale of what he was offering. It wasn't charity. It was an opportunity, a lifeline, a chance to reclaim not just her own future, but her father's name. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because," he said, his voice dropping, becoming more personal. "Atonement isn't just about apologies, Maya. It's about action. It's about rebuilding what was broken. I can't give you back your father, but I can help you build his legacy." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "And because I can't stand the thought of your talent being wasted. It would be a crime against architecture itself." Tears she hadn't realized she was holding back began to fall. It was too much. The generosity, the thoughtfulness, the sheer magnitude of his gesture. It was a form of redemption so complete, so selfless, that it left her defenses in ruins. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Say you'll think about it," he said gently. "Say you'll consider letting me help you become the person you were always meant to be." The Jenkins Group was born not with a bang, but with the quiet, determined scratching of pens on paper. Maya, after a week of intense consideration, had accepted, but she had done so with her own conditions. Julian could be the silent, anonymous investor, but she would have absolute creative control, and he would have to be her first client. "My first client?" he had asked, surprised. "Yes," she had confirmed, a playful but firm glint in her eyes. "My first project will be the complete redesign of the Sterling Enterprises executive floor. It's cold, intimidating, and has the personality of a tax form. It's in desperate need of a human touch." Julian had laughed, a real, genuine laugh. "You're going to fire me as your own client on the first day, aren't you?" "Only if you make suggestions about adding more glass and steel," she had retorted. Their new dynamic was a strange, exhilarating dance. They spent hours together, not in tense boardrooms, but in her new, small office, hunched over blueprints and design sketches. He would bring coffee, she would bring sandwiches. They would argue, debate, and create. He was a surprisingly good client. He listened to her ideas, challenged her when he disagreed, but ultimately he deferred to her vision. He was watching her, not as a CEO assessing an employee, but as a man in awe of a brilliant artist at work. She, in turn, was seeing a new side of him. The supportive partner, the enthusiastic collaborator, the man who would listen for an hour as she explained why the angle of a window mattered, not for its cost, but for the way it would catch the morning light. The walls between them were not just crumbling, they were being redesigned into bridges. The physical distance between them was also shrinking. They would often work so closely over a blueprint that their shoulders would brush, sending a jolt of electricity through Maya that she tried to ignore. He would lean in to look at a detail on her screen, his clean, masculine scent filling her senses, making it hard to focus on zoning regulations. The breaking point came on a late Friday night. They were the only two left in the office, surrounded by sketches for the new executive lounge. A soft jazz station, one of Julian's favorites, was playing quietly from his phone. "I think we're done for the night," Maya said, stretching, her body tired but her mind buzzing with creative energy. "Almost," Julian said, his voice quiet. He hadn't moved from his chair, he was just watching her. "There's one more design element we need to discuss." "Oh, what did I miss?" "Us," he said simply. She froze, her hand hovering over a roll of blueprints. "Julian, He stood up and walked over to her, stopping just a foot away. The air between them was thick with unspoken feelings, with a full month of shared work, shared laughter, and simmering, unresolved tension. "I've been playing by your rules, Maya," he said, his voice a low, intimate murmur. "I've kept my distance. I've been the client, the silent partner." He took a small step closer. "But I can't pretend anymore. I'm not just investing in your company. I'm invested in you, completely." "This is complicated," she whispered, her heart hammering. "No, it's not," he countered, his gaze intense. "It's the simplest thing in the world. I'm in love with you, Maya. I've been in love with you since the day you held up that mirror and forced me to see myself." He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "And I know," he said, his voice dropping even lower, "that you feel something too. I see it in your eyes when you look at me. I hear it in your voice when you say my name." She couldn't deny it. Not anymore. The professional facade, the wall of caution she had so carefully maintained, it all dissolved under the warmth of his touch, under the raw honesty in his eyes. "Yes," she breathed, the single word a quiet surrender. He didn't need any more encouragement. He leaned in and kissed her. It was not the desperate, confused kiss from months ago. This was a kiss of certainty, of patience, of a love that had been quietly, steadily built on a foundation of shared work and mutual redemption. It was a kiss that felt like coming home. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless, their foreheads resting against each other. "So," he whispered, a smile in his voice, "is it too late to renegotiate the terms of our partnership?" "It depends," she whispered back, a smile on her own lips. "What are your new terms?" "Dinner," he said. "A real one, no blueprints, no talk of zoning codes. Just you and me," she said, her heart so full she felt about it might burst. "I can agree to those terms." The kiss changed the blueprint of their lives. The carefully drawn lines between client and architect, between victim and aggressor, were erased, replaced by the warm, vibrant, and sometimes chaotic colors of a real relationship. The days that followed were a revelation for both of them. For Maya, it was the discovery of a joy she had long thought was lost to her. She found in Julian not just a lover, but a true partner. He was her biggest cheerleader, her most insightful critic, and her most devoted student. He would listen, fascinated, as she explained the principles of architectural psychology, the way light and space could influence human emotion. He celebrated her victories, and on the rare days when self-doubt crept in, he was her unwavering anchor. For Julian, it was like learning to breathe again. Maya brought a lightness and a laughter to his world that he hadn't known it was missing. She teased him mercilessly about his ridiculously expensive suits, introduced him to the simple, profound joy of a Sunday morning spent in a local diner, and taught him that sometimes the best business decisions were made not in a boardroom but over a shared pizza on the floor of their office, surrounded by sketches. The redesign of the Sterling Enterprises executive floor became a symbol of their partnership. Under Maya's direction, the cold, intimidating space of glass and steel was transformed. She replaced the dark, heavy furniture with clean, modern pieces. She brought in living plants, warm woods, and art created by local, emerging artists. The floor was no longer a temple to power. It was a space designed to foster creativity and collaboration. It was a space with a soul. Julian watched the transformation with a quiet awe. She wasn't just redesigning a floor, she was redesigning his world, rebuilding it into something better, more human. Their love story, once a secret, unspoken tension, became the quiet, accepted truth of their lives. They were inseparable, a team in every sense of the word. The whispers on the 50th floor had long since died down, replaced by a deep, genuine respect for the woman who had not only won the CEO's heart, but had also made the company a better place to work. The culmination of their project was the grand reopening of the executive floor. Julian had insisted on a formal event, inviting not just the board and major investors, but every employee of the company, from the mailroom clerk to the senior VPs. He wanted everyone to see the change that Maya had brought. The night of the event, the newly designed floor was buzzing with a new, vibrant energy. People were laughing, mingling, admiring the art. The space felt alive. Maya stood beside Julian, looking radiant in a simple, elegant emerald green dress. She looked out at the crowd, at the space she had created, and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. "You did this," Julian murmured, his hand finding hers. "You brought life back into this place." "We did this," she corrected, squeezing his hand. "Together." Later in the evening, Arthur Sterling Sr. approached them. He looked around the transformed space, a rare, appreciative expression on his stern face. "Thomas would have been proud of this," he said to Maya, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "He always believed that buildings should serve the people inside them, not the other way around." He then turned to Julian. "You chose well, son. She has made you a better man." It was the highest praise Julian could ever receive from his father. He looked at Maya, his heart full, and knew it was true. When it was time for the official speech, Julian stepped up to a small podium. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice warm and confident. "Welcome to the new Sterling Enterprises." He looked around the room. "For a long time, I believed that the strength of this company was in its numbers, in its power, in the steel of its buildings. But I was wrong." His eyes found Maya in the crowd, and he smiled. "I learned from a very wise and very talented architect that the true strength of any structure isn't in its foundation of concrete, but in its foundation of humanity. This new space," he gestured around the room, "is a testament to that philosophy. It's a testament to the idea that our greatest asset is our people." He paused, his gaze fixed on Maya. "And tonight, I want to honor the architect of this transformation. Not just of this floor, but of my life." He stepped down from the podium and walked directly to her. The entire room fell silent, watching. "Maya Jenkins," he said, his voice now a low, intimate murmur, meant only for her, though the entire room was listening. "You came into my life to seek justice for your father, and in doing so, you gave me a gift I never knew I needed: redemption." He took a small velvet box from his pocket, the same one Arthur Sr. had given him when he had asked for his blessing. "I know I don't deserve a second chance," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I am asking for one anyway. I am asking you to be my partner, my compass, my co-architect in building a life together." He knelt down on one knee, right there in the middle of the room he had once ruled with fear, now filled with the warmth she had created. "Maya," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple, stunning diamond ring that glittered in the soft light. "You have redesigned my heart. Will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down Maya's face, but they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. The room was holding its collective breath. "A building is only as strong as its foundation," she whispered, her voice trembling, "and there is no stronger foundation than love." She nodded, her smile the brightest thing in the room. "Yes, Julian, yes. I will marry you." The room erupted in a thunderous, heartfelt applause. Julian slid the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a deep, loving kiss that sealed their past and promised their future. As he held her, he whispered in her ear, "For the record, I would have even agreed to no more glass and steel." She laughed through her tears, her heart so full it felt like it was finally, truly, home. "Good," she whispered back, "because our house is going to have a lot of warm woods and comfortable chairs." And in that moment, surrounded by the life and light she had brought into his world, Julian Sterling knew he had finally closed the most important deal of his life. The wedding of Maya Jenkins and Julian Sterling was not the grand society spectacle everyone expected. Instead, it was a quiet, intimate ceremony held in the sun-drenched atrium of the Chicago Cultural Center, the place where they had first found their way back to each other. Their guests were a small, curated collection of the people who mattered most. Arthur Sterling Sr., who looked at his son with a newfound quiet pride, the architects from Maya's new firm, the Jenkins Group, and Julian's executive team, who had become her staunchest allies. Maya walked down the aisle in a simple, elegant dress of her own design, a perfect fusion of modern lines and classic grace. Julian watched her approach, his heart full, seeing not just his bride, but his partner, his equal, his entire world. Their vows were not flowery promises, but simple, heartfelt truths. "You taught me," Julian said, his voice thick with emotion as he slid a simple platinum band onto her finger, "that the strongest foundations are built on truth and forgiveness. You are the foundation of my life, Maya, my home." "And you," she replied, her own eyes shining with tears as she placed a matching ring on his, "taught me that a life isn't defined by its broken pieces, but by the beauty we choose to build from them. You are the masterpiece of my heart, Julian." Their life together was a quiet testament to that promise. The Jenkins Group, with the silent backing of the anonymous investor, flourished. Maya became one of the most sought-after architects in the country, renowned for her human-centric designs. She built community centers, libraries, and affordable housing projects, creating spaces that were not only beautiful, but also imbued with a sense of dignity and hope. Her father's legacy was not just restored, it was amplified, touching lives in a way he had only dreamed of. Julian, with Maya by his side, continued to transform Sterling Enterprises. He became a pioneer in ethical business practices, proving that profitability and integrity were not mutually exclusive. But his greatest joy was his role as a partner in the Jenkins Group. He was the silent force behind the scenes, handling the contracts and finances, freeing Maya to do what she did best: create. They built a home together, a beautiful, light-filled house that Maya designed herself. It was a place of warmth and laughter, filled with books, art, and the messy, beautiful chaos of a life well lived. 2 years after their wedding, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Maya was in her home studio, sketching a new design for a children's hospital. Julian walked in, carrying 2 cups of tea, a ritual that had become a cherished part of their day. "What are you creating now, my brilliant wife?" he asked, placing a cup beside her. "A place for healing," she said, a soft smile on her face. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her and looking at the blueprint taking shape on her screen. "It's beautiful." "I was thinking," she said, leaning back against his chest, "about that first day, in the conference room, when you threw that marker at me." He winced, the memory still carrying a sting of shame. "My most regrettable moment." "No," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "It was the most important moment. It was the moment the old Julian Sterling started to die, and the man I loved started to be born." He looked at her, his heart full of a gratitude so profound it was almost overwhelming. "And to think," he murmured, "it all started with a stolen blueprint." "It didn't start with a blueprint," she corrected gently, her hand coming up to cup his cheek. "It started with a pen." He smiled, remembering. "A pen that recorded every one of my sins." "No," she whispered, her eyes shining with all the love she felt. "A pen that recorded the first chapter of our story." He leaned in and kissed her, a deep, lingering kiss that was a promise of all the chapters they had yet to write. Theirs was a love story built not on a fairy tale fantasy, but on the hard-won ground of forgiveness and redemption. They were 2 broken people who had found in each other the missing pieces, redesigning not just buildings, but their own souls. And the life they built together was their true, shared, and most beautiful masterpiece. What did you think of the story of Julian and Maya? On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate their journey from adversaries to partners for life? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And for everyone who has stayed with us until the very end, who believes that even the biggest mistakes can be rebuilt into something beautiful with love and truth, please comment with a simple masterpiece. We are so grateful to share these stories with you. Thank you for watching. And don't forget to subscribe for more narratives that will change the world.